26. Depression. A person emotionally exhausted by months of fear and conflict may become apathetic, with little interest in his surroundings, or he may feel a more overwhelming, desperate, and powerful physical feeling of depression, a sickening heaviness in the pit of the stomach. It is said that the stomach is the most sympathetic organ in the body. It weeps when other organs are sick. It is certainly the focal point of depression. Depression is one of the worst phases of nervous breakdown because it robs so many of their wish to recover. However, there are still those who can rise sufficiently above it to hope for recovery, however deep their depression, and that they can do so organically. Antidepressant drugs, when used temporarily and when tailored to the individual, can help greatly, but these, like sedatives, should be prescribed by a doctor. Occupation. Although occupation is discussed in detail in a later section of this book, it must be specifically mentioned here because it is the mainstay in the treatment of depression. To cure depression, be occupied, keep off that bed in the daytime. I emphasize the importance of occupation in the company of others for depressed people. I have seen such people on the verge of recovery deteriorate severely when suddenly deprived of occupation. If depressed, do not attempt to recover by sitting about the house watching the days pass, trying to fill in each as it comes. You must have an organized program so that you can look ahead for days, preferably weeks, and know that your time will be occupied. I find it difficult to convince a patient's family of the importance of this. They have no conception of how long an idle hour can seem to a sufferer from nervous breakdown. His tired mind, turned inward on itself, is conscious of every second as it passes, so that an hour seems an eternity, and tension increases until it becomes almost unbearable. This situation is exasperating to a doctor to observe, because she knows that idleness, tension, and depression make a most formidable combination, which could have been avoided had she but had the family's cooperation. It is necessary that thoughts be claimed by outside interests, so that time passes more quickly, the strain is eased, and depression relieved. Small, happy, daily experiences. Normally our spirits are kept up by small, happy, daily experiences of which we are hardly aware. For example, while we wash up and try to decide whether to make the beds next or hose the garden, we handle the smooth china we like and notice the sun shining on the scarlet geraniums on the windowsill. Our heart lifts. When we go into the bedroom, it is much less than our usual annoyance that we remove the sleeping cat from the bed. The person with a nervous breakdown, if shown a garden full of geraniums, will probably stare and say, "Geraniums? What geraniums?" Her preoccupation with her problems and herself deadens her powers of observation, and so bars entry to these small joys. So many of these small happy experiences are waiting to help lift your spirit. The future is not as black as you may think. You do not need some great happiness to bring back joy in living. The little things will do that, as soon as you have eyes to see them. The lonely peace of solitude. Working out of doors is particularly recommended for depression. The brightness, the expanse of sky, the absence of restraining walls, the movement, all help to keep spirits raised and troubles in proportion. The depressed person with no inner source of joy for support depends almost entirely on a cheerful environment to help him. The melancholic atmosphere is almost unendurable. Indeed, his reaction to sadness is so exaggerated that a slightly depressing situation may seem tragic to him, and this reaction is quick. A nervously ill woman went to stay by the coast. She arrived at dusk on a windy grey day. As she stepped from the car, a gusty wind from the beach brought the sound of the local amateur band practicing mournfully nearby, and a handful of crows circled overhead calling their baleful call, call, call. The depressing effect was instantaneous and shattering. She felt her heart sink into her boots, and she said it took 2 days of sunshine to recover it. It is often better for a depressed person to sit in the local movies or have a meal in a busy shop or restaurant than to rest in the lonely peace of solitude. Brightness and diversion help to hold the interest and support the flagging spirit. Respite may highlight suffering. Some people with nervous breakdown refuse to visit the movies for several reasons. They say that the feeling of unreality they experience there makes them more aware of the frightening, unreal feeling of their breakdown. Others say that to hear so many people laughing happily only emphasizes their own isolation and misery. While others find that although they can lose themselves in a movie, to come back to the hard light of reality when the performance is over and face their breakdown again can be such a contrast, such a shock, that their illness seems more overwhelming and hopeless than ever. The respite only highlights their suffering. It is such strange experiences as these that make nervous breakdown a bewildering maze and keep it alive as a constant source of torture. To get out of the maze, you must go forward and meet these experiences when they come. Do not try to avoid them, but do not challenge them and seek them out unnecessarily. Merely accept them and be prepared to let more time pass until you can face them without suffering. Remember, the blow that strikes as you are recalled from temporary forgetfulness of your suffering is no more than a thought. You are being cowed by a thought. Do not be tricked by a thought. Why not try to think a comforting thought instead of a frightening one? This may not be easy at first, but practice makes it easier. Instead of thinking, "Dear God, the breakdown, I never escape," you can think, "I was able to forget for a while, that's good. I'll forget about it altogether in time." Recognize how much of your breakdown is built up from no more than frightening thoughts. Float past them. You can with practice. Facing your breakdown after momentarily forgetting it is an experience you may have to go through daily. This will be less and less painful each time you face it with acceptance and hope, and the breakdown itself will seem less and less overwhelming. But I do not mean that you must face every detail of breakdown that frightens or depresses you. It may be wiser to avoid certain experiences, especially if facing them serves no useful purpose. For example, one woman had had an especially depressing, upsetting nervous experience at the movies, and she said that she now had only to see the outside of a cinema to have devastating reactions. She had made herself worse by going especially to the movies to try and conquer this feeling. I explained that her reactions were severe now only because of present oversensitization of her adrenaline-releasing nerves, and that visiting the movies in the future would not always affect her this way. While it was necessary for her to face, unmask, and then float past fears that must be met, going to the movies served no useful purpose at that moment, and it would be better to avoid such unnecessary suffering until her reactions calmed down. But I emphasized that she must avoid sensibly, hopefully, not fearfully, knowing that eventually she would have only a memory of her earlier disturbance. She must realize that avoidance now was merely to save reopening a healing wound. She would not recover so quickly if she fearfully avoided the movies, or if she went there tensely prepared to fight this thing. Can you appreciate the difference between these two approaches? It is one of the keys to recovery. Living alone. When they are well, people live alone successfully because they have the energy and interest to take part in the life about them. When in breakdown, living alone may seem unbearably tragic and depressing. I strongly advise you not to live alone while having a nervous breakdown. Leave home temporarily and stay with friends or find other group living options, anywhere you can live with other people. But do not make any arrangements now to permanently relinquish your home. You will feel differently about it when you are recovered, and homes are not easy to find. Make no impulsive, irretrievable step. Depression is you, not the world. Also, a depressed person should remember that depression is a physical feeling expressing the extreme tiredness of his emotions. As you stop flogging yourself with fear, fight and flight from fear, you become less tired, and depression gradually lifts. Your body is like a car with a flat battery. If you keep trying to turn the engine over, the battery has no chance to become recharged. If you can float without flogging your body with fear and worry, it will recharge itself with enjoyment. Depression does not last forever. Float past this period of depression looking hopefully ahead. Above all, remember that depression is you, and it is not the world that is so terrible. Depression is an illness, just as influenza is an illness, and nature is waiting as readily to cure one as the other, if you will let her. But depression works in such a vicious cycle. The memory of yesterday's suffering makes such a bad start for today. You can get outside that circle by saying, "All right, yesterday was a bad day. Today may not be good either. But as the days go by, they will gradually improve if I let them. When you can say this and mean it, you will see a miracle happen. Remember, however deep your depression, you can recover. Depression is a temporary illness. Antidepressant drugs can be helpful. Keep off that bed in the daytime and be occupied in the company of others. Have a planned program of occupation. When respite highlights suffering, review your thoughts and substitute hope for despair. Once more, depression is an illness. Nature is waiting to kill you.